Hello, everyone. Welcome to Midweek Gaming, and you'll forgive me if I skip the introductions because there's a lot to talk about this week, and it's gonna get wild. Warframe lore tends to do that. So, for those who don't know, in the know, Warframe released a big update this week, and you'll forgive us if we're a bit late because I wanted to actually give a little bit of an embargo on this one for spoilers because, yeah, there's some pretty heavy stuff that comes out of this one, and some interesting ramifications for the story going forward for Warframe. So I figured I'd give everyone a good few days to play that. It came out on Tuesday. So, yep, we're officially Saturday night now, and it's only about a 30-minute mission, so I'm not going to consider it a too big thing. It's not like there's a whole, like, Destiny 2 campaign-sized thing that came here. If that were the case, I'd have given at least a few weeks, but this is, like I said, only one mission. It's like 30 minutes, and yeah. So, not as long, not as big, but a lot of ramifications. So, here we go. Destiny got... Warframe. Warframe tingling. I'm so used to complaining about Destiny. Warframe got a big update this Tuesday, as I already said, and that's called Jade Shadows. The Jade Shadows update introduces us to the newest Warframe in the cast. I think we're on like 50-something at this point. And that being the titular Jade. Jade herself is interesting because she herself is not only aesthetically interesting, but also a lot of lore comes with her, like I said, and we'll get into that. Jade Shadows is also interesting because it also functions as a backstory quest, somewhat, to Stalker, the titular character in the Warframe game that has been around since a very long time now and is a fan favorite, kind of an anti-hero nowadays. But no one's exactly sure what his whole shtick is. I mean, we know he was a low guardian, and okay, before I go too far into this, a disclaimer. As I said before, Warframe lore is complex, crazy, and completely nonsensical to a degree sometimes. So, if you're interested, I highly suggest you play Warframe. I play Warframe. We're not playing Warframe here because sadly Justin does the video capture and he does not have Warframe. But I do. I play it a
I
lot,
will
and I can vouch
freely
for its
admit it
lore.
for what it is. I do not feel like sinking myself more into a game that requires a large amount of time investment.
It truly does,
I
honestly. It's
I
not
am
as
sorry,
bad.
Warframe players. I have very well seen your game. I've watched a lot of the campaign-based stuff, and it does look wonderful, but I am sorry.
Yeah, no, honestly, it is a game that definitely takes a lot of time investment to get in. It's not pay to win by any means. It's not, honestly, I don't want to say anything like it's not, like heavy cash up or anything like that. It's just the fact that like there's so much stuff and so much to get and so much to do that it is a heavy time investment to get actually like good at this game and to get good stuff to get good at this game. RNG be very cruel sometimes. So, yeah. But I can say, as a lore nerd, it's good lore. But that said, going in, I'm just going to reference the lore of Warframe. And if you're interested, there's tons of channels. There's Siege, I think Siege, I think that is. Starlord does interesting lore, Warframe lore. Bife did it in the past, but honestly, he hasn't done it for a very long time. So I would go with, like I said, Siege or Starlord. A bunch of good guys that do Warframe lore, and it is absolutely great. But again, I'm just gonna go in, pretend like you know all the things I'm talking about, because trust me, if I had to explain it all, we'd be here all night. So, actually, probably longer. So I'm just gonna go, and here we go. So, Stalker, right? Titular character, been in here for a very long time. This quest was meant to also serve as a backstory to why he became a Warframe. And, yeah, it certainly doesn't outright say it, but it can be implied. As for Jade, it also functions like I said, as an introductory quest to her. And spoiler alert, like I said, this is where we're officially doing spoilers. So if you haven't played Jade Shadows yet, I'm gonna give you a chance to leave. Okay? They gone?
3, 2, 1.
Okay. So Jade turns out to be the wife of Stalker. I said it. More importantly enough, it actually turns out that Jade basically assisted Stalker and I guess not dying during what I'm assuming is the fall of the Orokin way back when. So we actually figured out how he managed to basically get off not being killed by the Tenno but during the rebellion of the Orokin and the Insight tournaments. Because Jade, I guess, just kind of talked the Tenno down or convinced them, or we just get like a still pic of her standing between Stalker and a Tenno with their Skara to his throat. So I'm guessing it was either a talk down or a fight off or something like that. But anyways, so yeah, she's been with him this whole time, and he has no real idea as to why she saved her. Being a Warframe does have a habit of scrambling with the brain, but we'll get to that later. So anyways, they've been living together, and yeah, now she's dying. And Stalker has no idea why. He is desperate to find a way to save her because, like I said, he saved her, or she saved him. So, at first, he goes to like collect some medical stuff, doesn't work. Eventually, Hun Hao, who, by the way, Hun Hao is still with him. Apparently, they're just living together like roommates these days at the bottom of Uranus somewhere. He's constantly egging on Stalker to go find the Tenno, us, and only we are the ones who are capable of saving her, at least knowing potentially how to. He, at first, is basically tells Hun Hao off in his single word of never. He's a man of few words, the Stalker. So, eventually, however, he does relent after his attempts fail, and he sneaks into our orbiter, which also, fun fact, this quest shows, Stalker, for those who don't remember, way back in the second Dream Quest, second Dream Quest, like several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, he snuck into our orbiter. And apparently, all this time, he's been capable of also doing that again. Like, on how just says, you remember the old path, and then we cut to the moment when, again, we're playing as Stalker throughout this whole quest. But we cut to ourselves breaking into our own orbiter and just having to sneak past Ortis, which is kind of funny, but yeah, it just kind of goes to show you that throughout all these years, he's just kind of known how to break into our ship, and he's just never done that. All the years of hunting us down in missions, and yet after he kills us once, or we defeat him once, he just kind of lets it go, and rinse and repeat internally, I guess. Whatever. Whatever, I guess. Anyways, we help him. Agree to anyway. He collects a bit of infested gunk from a Juggernaut, goes back to Jade, patches her up, attempts to anyway. And then we reveal that, by the way, whatever's killing Jade, yeah, she's not fighting it. So, things get interesting when Stalker still demands that we attempt to save her, and when we attempt to save her, we found out exactly why she's dying. Turns out, here's another big spoiler, shocker for you. DE, when they were showing off Jade, was actually very cautious not to show too much of Jade. Her front was like very secretive, no one knows. Even her character model has like, I almost like to say wings, because she's an angelic inspired frame, like covering her stomach. No one knows, you know. And even in her character art, it's always her back. Even in the trailer too. Why is this? Turns out she's pregnant. The first pregnant Warframe we have. And by the by, know how she's dying? Yeah, it's because she's conceiving a child. Remember I said that there's an origin to her and Stalker? Yeah, there's a connection that goes deep. You might be seeing where the connection is, but we'll talk about it directly later. So yeah, in this moment, we kind of help conceive a child from a Warframe, which, okay, that's a thing. Now we have a baby Warframe, which is both cute and, as a lore master, deeply confusing.
I mean,
But
also,
I guess
mind you, the fact of it is not a child, but a baby. And Warframes are
yes,
meant to be, Warframes. So,
yeah. For
baby
those who don't,
Warframe.
yeah, for those who don't remember, Warframes were literally the participants of the Warframe project that the Orokin way back when took from their empire, volunteers or not, took the Helminth virus, jammed it into these people, and basically turned them into super soldiers. Yeah.
So,
To Ballas, who most certainly was responsible for this, why a pregnant woman? What was the conception here?
what have you done?
What have you done? I know you were into human experimentation, but just why, man? Why? But anyways, I think there's a reason for that, but we'll get to that later. So anyways, we help conceive the child, and by the by, throughout all this gallivanting around that Stalker's been doing, he's attracted the attention of the Corpus, who are now raiding his secret lair base on the bottom of Uranus. We fight them off, now with the child in hand. Jade herself perishes in the childbirth, sadly. And so we fight to the surface with Stalker, or as Stalker, I should say, up to the surface where we're confronted with an absolute brigade of Corpus troops who are trying to kill Stalker and take whatever he has, because they want to please Parvos, and Parvos, I guess, is into Orokin stuff and whatnot. However, eventually, after seeing the child, the captain of the Corpus crew calls the whole thing off, freaks the flip out, because, I mean, I would too, considering what the heck I'm seeing, calls the whole thing off and just lets him go. I'm abbreviating a great deal here. It's a fun quest. I suggest you play it, but anyways.
Yes.
He then cut to Lua, where Stalker still has the child, and he's kind of walking around, and he's having flashbacks to his time. We finally learn what Stalker was before he was a Warframe. Shocker, he wasn't always a Warframe. He was a low guardian named Soren, and Jade? Yeah, Jade turns out to have been his wife, actually, and they were going to have a child. So the child he's carrying, yeah, it's Stalker's. Congratulations, buddy, you're a father now. And it has bits of dialogue where Soren or Stalker is freaking out because when Jade tells him that, they're going to have a kid, he's like, no, but the laws, the Orokin, what will they do if they find out? As a lore master, I'm not entirely sure what he's referencing. It could be a reference to the overpopulation problem. I mean, we know the Orokin were having some serious overpopulation problems, so maybe there was some law in place against child, or maybe Jade was high up in the hierarchy of the Orokin or something like that, so conceiving children was like a no-no for the political scandal. I don't know. The fallout of this, presumably, is actually, I had this come to me while reading another person's comment. I can't remember who proposed this, but I think it was actually the wiki that kind of put this together, and it makes sense. Basically, how Stalker and Jade both became Warframes from this. So if you're wondering how a pregnant woman was taken for the Super Soldier program, probably as punishment, honestly. So my guess is the Orokin did find out about the child, and both Stalker and Soren and Jade were punished by subsequently being turned into Warframes. At the very end of the quest, we see Stalker come in, and it's actually a very nice, sad, nice moment where we get a memory of when Soren says, freaking out about the laws, Jade says, oh, you'll protect us, you always do, right? Yeah, right. And in the very end, the quest cuts out with you basically naming the kid. You have two choices, Sirius or Orion. I personally picked Orion because, yes, I've watched Harry Potter, and I know the fate of Sirius, and number one, that would be corny, and number two, probably very bad luck. If you know the fate of that character, you know what I'm talking about. So, that's Jade Shadows! In the end, we get a message from Hunhao where basically he says that Stalker will not be returning to his lair. Here's basically the Jade Warframe, the blueprints to her, and that while the Stalker would not have wanted that, she, that being Jade, would have. So that's how we get the blueprint initially, and that leads into the whole Ascension mission, yada yada yada. So that's Jade Shadows from a nutshell perspective. This opens up a massive can of worms lore-wise, and it does really shine light into the fact that, like, we're getting more stories as to what the Warframes were. For a long time, we've always kind of wondered, like, are the Warframes sentient? Were they sentient? With Dante Unbound, we kind of got more of the story of, like, because the Laverian was all helped being curated by Dante, who himself was a Warframe, but always seemed to edit out the fact that the Tenno were involved. So I've conceived of a bit of a timeline of events, take this for what you will, but I honestly think that this probably is kind of what happened, because it's been hinted in the lore, for those who know, that there possibly was a time when the Warframes were sentient, and we know that the Jade we interact with was herself actually sentient. She was a sentient Warframe. So what actually happens? Well, I think there's kind of like, from my understanding, this is kind of what happened. We kind of have the old timeline, which is the Oricans were created, or the Warframes were made. They were a complete flop because they had a tendency to go mad and savage despite being perfect bodily speaking and abilities. So they had super soldiers, but they completely went nuts when they tried to control them. At best, they were berserk units the Orokin threw on the field, and they just kind of killed everything in sight, so they just kind of had to point them in the right direction and get the heck out of the way. They tried to make them more docile, but this only resulted in them becoming brain dead, so they quickly shelved the project. Then the Tenno come along, they find transference, they think, oh, this can solve the brain dead problem. By basically turning the Tenno into the brain and the Warframe is the body. Margulis happens, yada yada yada. They end up doing it anyway. And yeah, conscripting child soldiers, ring-a-ding-ding, they got their Warframes. Warframe project is restarted. That doesn't really make sense with what we know, though, because, again, it kind of is like, where does Umbra play into this? Umbra, for those who know, is, again, the sentient Warframe. And Ballas, the creator of the Warframes, refers to Umbra as a miracle. For those who don't know, again, spoilers for the Sacrifice quest. It's a several-year-old quest at this point, so if you haven't played it, Go and play it now. Okay? Okay. So, basically, they create Umbra and give him sentience. How does Valis give him sentience? Well, he traumatizes him during the transformation process by basically taunting him throughout the whole thing, and his final moments while he's a human and just as he's finished transformation is basically him killing his own son. Did I mention the Orokin were monsters? The Orokin are monsters. And that's how they kind of gave Umbra sentience, by traumatizing him to the point where he'll have to remember where he is, because that always works. I mean, it did, so who's the real fool here?
I can feel things calming
But again, it
down
really doesn't
already.
explain, like, why
It's
would it be a
remarkable,
miracle?
the
Because
difference
if
in
this
his
timeline
voice
is
without
right,
the witness's presence.
I mean, they had sentient
Imagine
Warframes in the
what the
past, but
universe
we
will
know
feel
that there are other sapient
like. A
Warframes, so
collective
where do they
sigh
kind of
of
play in?
relief
And
and a
So I kind
moment
of
of
conceived of a new
peace.
timeline here. Take
And
this for what you
then
will.
the
And I
tumult of
currently have the idea that we have
change.
kind of, again, two
Yes,
generations of
I have
Warframe.
no doubt
Gen
you will
1 and Gen
use
2.
peace for
Gen
your
2
own
is the
gain
one we're
this
kind of
round,
on now, and
Valis.
it's kind of always
You do
been.
realize that you're the
Gen 1
next
was the
target,
original
don't
Warframes
you?
that were created.
Oh
They
no.
worked
Oh
effectively
dear.
until they didn't. They
Oh
were, and this is
my.
kind of what Lloyd in Dante Unbound kind of tells us, that the Warframes at
Who could have
some point were
foreseen
independent,
this?
but then something caused them all to go crazy, and they were kind of all hunted down by the Orokin in what is effectively a witch hunt. So,
There's that.
what possibly... Hmm?
There's that.
There's that. So, again, Gen 1 is basically they worked until they didn't, which would explain why we get lore of, like, Warframes, like, probably the original Dante was from this era of Warframes. Jade herself, the one we interact with, was probably from Gen 1. Stalker, definitely a Gen 1. And basically, they got hunted down and executed, or they got put on ice. Probably executed, but... And from that, they kind of shelved the project. And then we have Gen 2, which is where the War can discover the children of the 10-0, their void powers, their ability to kind of possess the Warframes. They think, oh, that could fix the problem. So what they do is they take all the old Gen 1 Warframes and restart the project, taking the old Gen 1s, which had a will of their own, and again, once again, tweaking the Helminth virus and making them, again, brain dead. Easier to control, probably. And in doing so, possibly also retrofit the Gen 1s to some degree as well, those that might have survived. I mean, we know, for example, in the quest that Jade herself is not very much well known in the history of the Orokin, and that a lot of her files are mysteriously, possibly redacted. This makes sense because if you know the lore of Loreframe, or lore of Warframe, you know that their Orokin were quite fond of a certain method of execution known as the Jade Light. And yes, I'll cut you off there. Yes, Jade is the source of the Jade Light, as it turns out. Said method of execution was pretty much you get blasted by a beam of light and poof, gone. No pain, no blood, no gore, no nasty screaming, just gone. It was a quite preferred method for them. Though I imagine it wasn't because of it was merciful, just because the fact it didn't get their floors dirty. That does seem like the Orkin's mindset, really. More concerned about having to clean it up than they are about the actual screaming. So yeah, she was the proprietor of the Jade Light, and as a result, she was probably pretty high up there Warframe-wise. It would make sense why she was redacted, and possibly the original Jade, which we interact with, was not killed off like the rest of her peers, or hunted down, possibly. Plus, her husband was a low guardian, so maybe there was some level of they let it slide to some degree. But anyways, we have the Gen 2 Warframes, and with the Gen 2 Warframes, this would also explain why we do see some Warframes that are sentient, and yet some that are not. And yet this would also make sense with what it happens in the sacrifice, with them saying Umbra is a miracle. Because remember, unlike in Gen 1, where they attempted back in Gen 1 originally to make them calm, but they just made them brain dead. In the case of the Gen 2s, they did that retroactively. So they just kind of killed off all the crazy ones, and then Gen 2 was the one that actually made them less competent, mentally speaking. So the fact that they were able to make a Gen 2 Warframe using the same strain that created the brain dead super soldiers, and yet created Umbra, which himself is sapient, is a miracle by that contrast. The formula should render him without any form of higher brain function, yet he exists with a mind. So, yay, I think.
Maybe.
I mean, would you consider trauma of of killing your son? Oops, can I say that word on YouTube? Said it anyway. Too
Mm-mm.
late. Yeah, well. The would you consider
Redaction
the
of redaction.
yeah, would you consider the trauma of offing your own son as a good thing? I guess the Aura can do. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And this again would fall in line of why we see some that are sapient and why some that are not, and why Umbra is still nonetheless considered a miracle. He shouldn't have higher brain functions, yet he does, so yay. That's kind of the theory I have worked out at the moment of the kind of timeline of events. Take it for what you will, though. Jade Shadows, though, is a pretty good quest. Fun fact about the Stalker himself, actually, there's some other Easter eggs that come with this as well. When you actually get the child after Jade passes, Stalker himself kind of becomes Jadified, so to speak. He kind of gets her powers, and he kind of has those continuing going forward. So if he hunts you down after you played the quest, you can actually see him with the same powers that he does in the quest, which is kind of nice. Also, there's a little Easter egg, which I don't want to say it's an Easter egg, more of a feature, really, that if you have a Jade Warframe in your party, when he confronts you out in the wild, instead of fighting you, he will just leave. Which is a nice touch. I mean, sentimental and all. I guess he's a sentimental father. But yeah, and again, I haven't been able to confirm any of that, but I'll take it at its word. Seems legit.
It's rumors, and I mean, I could see
It does
the
seem like something
Warframe
D would do.
devs. Yeah, it seems like that's something they would probably do. I could see them going and setting that up as a feature.
So yeah, that's Jade Shadows. Bunch of stuff, bunch of Warframe lore, and like I said, it just adds another box to the increasingly growing list of the Orcan's crimes against humanity. I mean, like I said, Ballast, the creator of Warframe, says they took their best, whether they wanted to or not. So, yeah, the Warframe program is just... Yeah. If you thought the UNSC and their Spartans were bad, oh, you haven't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, if you thought the child soldiers of the Spartan 2 program and the 99% casualty rate of the Spartan 1 program was bad, we're just
Yeah, you didn't say nothing yet.
We're just getting started.
At least the children were the main focus. No. Now it was the children and completely other people. Oh yeah, and all the other stuff that happened to them. Human experimentation. Great!
Very good for you.
And we're all just figuring it out as they go along. But honestly, the Orca probably would have looked at the 99% casualty rate and said, that's workable.
We have...
There's the 1%.
Mind you, that success doesn't have that much going on for him, but...
Yeah, I mean, think about it. The Warframes are still pretty strong, so hey, something good came of that. We have the universe's best unaliving machines. yeah, it's anyways. So yeah, it's Jade Shadows. Interesting lore, interesting tidbits. Like I said, if you haven't played it, what are you still doing here? I've just gone through the entire quest, for pity's sake. Go play it!
Go.
Honestly, really fun. Like, all my joking about the Orcan and their crimes aside, it was legitimately a very, like, touching quest. Between the music and the actual thing, I actually got sentimental. It was a very beautiful quest. So, yeah, honestly. And this is me coming off the back of, like, a few weeks ago playing the Destiny stuff and Cade's untimely death again, so...
Well, it's not really
Yeah.
untimely, mind you. It's
He died again, so he kind of chose it, so it's not untimely, it's just unfortunate.
He chose it. It was his choice this time.
Yeah, his choice this
He
time.
made his own fate, his own death this time.
This time.
And
yeah.
mind you, keep in mind, kind of throughout the entirety of the story, it kind of feels like he doesn't feel comfortable with the whole idea of being brought back. So...
Yeah, he does have that kind of feel like, I
He's
want to
like,
go back.
I've basically opened up your wounds again and put salt on it by just existing, so...
I mean, it almost feels like, not to go off topic too, but I'll kind of close it off after this. We're free to go, by the way, if this is kind of where the video ends.
If you're interested in Warframe, that is all.
That is all for the most part. But just on a side note to what you said, that almost make me feel like when we play the campaign, that almost feels like going back to the Harry Potter reference. What is it in the Deathly Hollows where one of the three brothers brings back his wife using the Philosopher's Stone, and
Ah,
the whole shtick
yes.
here is that she was dead, so now she wants to go back to being dead
It
because she
was
doesn't feel
not
like she
meant to be.
belongs. Yeah, it was not meant to be. So almost it got me that vibes. It really did.
True, true. You're not wrong. Well, nevertheless,
Anyways, nevertheless, congratulations to DE. Another amazing quest. 1999 is certainly going to be an absolute banger. We know in 1999 we'll be interacting with legitimately proto Warframes, like people before they fully became Warframes. But these are not like the original Warframes. They're like still in the sense of transfer. It's a mess. But anyways, hopefully we'll get more Warframe lore there because it seems like outside of like the man in the wall stuff we're getting with like the main focus of this arc, we're also getting more clarity on what the Warframes are and yada yada yada. So this is just another hat in that cap or feather in that cap. So I'll see you all in 1999 whenever the heck that gets here. Have a good one. Have a good night, and see you around. Bye bye, everyone.